Welcome to our second episode. We had a first, it's our second. Welcome again to Inside Out, exploring the roads to redemption. My name is Dr. Lawrence, and I'm the proud owner of A Bridge to Light, which our focus is to disrupt the school of prison pipeline and also enable formerly incarcerated persons their ability to reintegrate into society. And I'm joined with my brother and my friend, Mr. Thomas Cotton.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Thomas Cotton. I'm the founder and CEO of Redemption and Advancement Alliance, where our mission is to disrupt the cycles of incarceration. And we do that by helping the most important part of the process, the person. We help them create a blueprint for life.
Absolutely, sir. And the reason for this show, as I mentioned before, we're exploring the roads to redemption for the justice impacted, those involved in the community, the criminal justice system at all, and sometimes the obstacles that they face during their reentry process. But before we get started, hey, Thomas, what should we do, man?
Man, we got to like, share, subscribe, hit that notification button. That lets you know that, hey, new show's coming, new content's going to drop, and you're going to want to hear it because we're going to talk about things that a lot of other places are not talking about. So make sure you like, share, subscribe, boom, hit that notification button.
Also, we want to engage. We want to engage. We want you to take this discussion out in the streets, out in the classroom, engage us on the multiple platforms that we're on so we can have a live conversation and understand the issues through your eyes.
Yes.
You know, Thomas, everyone has a story, man. Everyone has a story. We kind of alluded to our story, how in the 80s we were aligned musically, culturally, fashion-wise, and so forth. And then at one point in time we diverged for different aspects of service. I served in one capacity, and you served in another. And then from that service, that unique service, we came back together. We came back together at the Morehouse School of Medicine, which is a crown jewel. The Morehouse School of Medicine's Justice Involved Care program, crown jewel, as Thomas just suggested, the only one like it in the country. And I highly recommend and suggest those that are qualified, come on and just take a look at that course, because I tell you, that experience coupled with the experience that Thomas and I have shared gave birth to this podcast. So it's as we say, it's all good. It's all good. So with that, with that story, you know, Thomas Cotton has a very, very unique story. And tonight we're going to just allow Thomas Cotton to tell his story so we can get to know him a little better and understand his perspective as a lived experience, and possibly how his lived experience played a role in for him to even go to or attend the Morehouse School of Medicine. So with that, Thomas, where are you from, man? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in California, South Central California, as I like to call it. We call it the armpit of California because it's so hot. I'm from Bakersfield, California. It's about 100 miles north of LA. Growing up in Bakersfield, it's still California. You got the sun, you got the everything that goes on. Summers were very hot. But we grew up, we talk about the 80s. There was no time like the 80s of growing up. We did things. We climbed trees, we rode bikes all the way across the city and back, and swam, did all the things that we did. We can talk back about the 80s. These kids won't know nothing about that.
No shade.
But,
no shade.
No shade. They just don't know the 80s was the time. And so, just growing up and just hanging and trying to be a kid. And so, there's times where being a kid kind of got a little different for me. And childhood got disrupted. And so, when I was 13, 2 weeks before my 14th birthday, my dad was stabbed by my stepmom because he was out cheating on her. And so, like, literally, my dad one night was here, one night he was almost dead. And fortunately for me, the doctors revived my dad, and he was able to survive that moment. So that was 2 weeks before my 14th birthday. I just graduated 8th grade at that point. And 2 weeks later, my 14th birthday, my mom, who lived in Las Vegas at the time, came to California, and she gave me an ultimatum. She basically wanted me to come live with her, but she said, if you want to keep all your family, you come live with me. But if you decide to stay, I'm going to disown you. Now, I understand like the mindset behind her wanting to disown me if this doesn't go her way. I learned that in later on in life. But at that moment, I had a choice to make. I had a choice that I can either stay with my dad and help him out because he can't even put his shoes on, and I'm an only child, so my dad's basically taking care of himself. And I can stay there and help him, or I can go live with my mom. I
Right.
decided to stay with my dad, and at that moment, my whole world just shifted. Um, the way things were, they had been, is not the way they would continue to be.
Wow. Wow. So at the age of 13, a few weeks before 14, you came, maybe witnessed, or you became aware that your father was stabbed almost to death.
Yes.
You were faced with that trauma. You were faced with just the natural traumas of being a 13-year-old guy,
Mm-hmm.
80s, dealing with a lot of different things growing up. Like, what is this? My body is changing. My voice is changing. My urges are changing. So you're dealing with that. And then, you have a situation when you turn 14, when your mom gives you actually a dilemma, ultimatum, this or that. You know,
Yep.
can you help us just, in a more deliberate manner? Can you help us see the world through the eyes of 14-year-old Thomas Cotton, and
Yeah.
the decisions that you were forced to make, and those decisions, how they impacted the rest of your life?
Yeah, so I had a lot of decisions to make. When the night that I found out my dad was stabbed, my I was asleep. I was at home, and this is a crazy thing. Back then we were able to live at or stay at home by ourselves, no parents around. So I'm
Right.
in bed, and my aunt comes and she's banging on my window, wakes me up. And when I go open the door, she's like, "Get your stuff. Your dad may not. Your dad might die." And so that's what she was saying, that your dad might die. And so I was like, it didn't even dawn on me. All I know is next thing I know, I'm in her car heading to her house and just sitting up here trying to figure out, you know, what's going on here. I had a best friend at the time, and her dad was one of the detectives on my dad's case. And I actually went over her house the next day, didn't even know that he was the detective, but she's just my best friend. So I just went over there so we could talk, and ended up seeing my dad's report. And I literally have the same report here. Uh, it said my dad was deceased.
Mm.
So I called my grandmother up and I'm like, man, did my dad die?
Wow.
And she was like, no, he's alive. He's struggling, but he's alive. And so I could trust my grandmother, tell me the truth. If he was dead, she would have said he was dead, but she's not. He's still alive. And so, fast forward a couple weeks later, my dad's out the hospital. He can't even put his own shoes on by himself and do anything pretty much by himself. So, I'm caring for him. It's my 14th birthday. My mom always comes to see me on my birthday. So she comes to see me on my birthday, but this one, she wants me to come live with her. And so she's literally heartbroken. There's a lot of things that went on. My mom's Korean. There's a lot of different things. She got disowned by her family. I've never met any of my Korean side of the family. So,
Mm.
um, and so she gets, has this disowning from her family. So, a lot of times when you're going through the worst hurt that you can go through is when you use the weapons that you have available to you. And I see that now, and she understands that now. We've reconciled and everything many years ago. But at this moment in time, I make that decision. My mom leaves and she's gone. So I'm 14 years old making decisions on my own now. My dad never fully mentally recovers, physically
Mm.
recovered. So now we're at the mercy of the system. He's getting, these I don't know, the social security checks and different other things. And so
Yes.
we're pretty much living poor at that point.
Yes, sir.
Sometimes, and the one thing no shade on my dad, but he had a drinking problem. So he was never a belligerent drinker, but he drank. And
Yes.
um, so our food supply, we had no food at times. Sometimes we had
Mhm.
hot water, sometimes we didn't. Sometimes we had electricity, sometimes we didn't. And so about a year later, I'm going through these trials, but I have my cousin's like my best friend, and he would get like $50 allowance and come over and we buy frozen pizzas, top ramen, and frozen burritos, and stock up, and that's what I would have to eat for the week. And
Yeah.
so he'd look out, but he needed to look out for himself because it wasn't like he was balling either.
Right.
He had his $50, so we always had connects to the hood, always, because we lived born and raised in the hood. And so we would take that $50 now, and we were like, you know what? Let's see if we could double up. And if you don't know what a double up is, look it up. There's an Urban Dictionary. So, um, but we would take that $50 and double it up, and we make 100. And so now we can do the
Right.
same stuff, but then still have the $50 left over. Do the same
Right.
stuff with the first 50 and still have the other 50 left over. So we decided, you know what? Let's make enough money, put in our pockets, get some clothes and everything else. So when school's in, we don't have to worry about this. So we did
Yes.
that, and we quit. And we just said, you know what? If things ever get hard again, we know exactly what we're gonna do.
Y'all retired.
Yeah, we
Y'all
retired
retired out the game
at the age of 15. We was
at the age of
retired.
15.
but but there's a caveat. If things ever get hard again, we know exactly what we're gonna do.
Yes.
So
Yes, sir.
fast forward throughout high school, you know, I I was a misfit. I was gang banging because everybody I hung around with was in a gang. But I had people in different parts of the city, and that I still show love to, and so they still show love back to me. So I was able to go through different places in the city that and have different connections. Um, but I was a misfit. I
Yes.
wasn't, I didn't have to listen to anybody because no one was telling me anything. Um, Went through 4 different high schools, and didn't graduate on time. I
Mm.
missed graduation by one class because I cussed out a teacher and he kicked me out. I was
Yes.
just looking at my transcript also. Uh, it wasn't just that one moment. There were 2 other classes that I failed. I didn't really, I was looking back. I was like, what else happened? There's 2 other classes I failed. If I would have just knocked those classes out, I would have graduated on time.
Don't
But
worry,
I
you in
didn't.
good company, man. You in good company.
Yeah, yeah,
In our next show, our
yeah,
next episode, we're gonna talk about scholarly attainment in high school.
yeah. Exactly, man. High school was something else, and I mean, there's just so many distractions, so many different things you could be a part of. But I just tell you, like, how crazy things were. In my freshman year, I went to a school, and I rarely went to that school because I was out ditching school, going to these parties, doing this, doing that. I was in class one day, high from smoking weed, and this guy starts talking about me. I look at him. I'm like, man, you don't even know me, man. He's like, yeah, but I see blah blah blah, and I just jumped on him, started fighting him right there in class. I did that a couple times. They kicked me out, and so I had to go to a school that was nearer to where I lived at. This was in my old neighborhood, so I went to the new neighborhood school. Wasn't no better. The first day I get to this school, I run into a guy. He's still my best friend to this day. But I run into this guy. He's like, "Hey, cuz, you here now?" I'm like, "Yeah. All right, meet us after school. We about to ride on these fools." And he's talking about the white boys.
Yeah.
And man, the first day I get to this school, I get suspended for a week because we go into this fight. I come back off that suspension, and we, go back at them. Suspended another 3 days. My first 10 days of this high school, I was suspended. And so, when you're suspended, you have no supervision. You go out and do stuff.
Yes.
And there's always that mindset. So that's kind of what it was like growing up. And eventually I did graduate. Went to night school. after I was supposed to graduate. But after I finished night school and finished my graduation is when the big disruptions began. I started feeling hopeless. I was almost homeless at the time. I was sleeping on couches and different other stuff. I had a lot of other personal things going on, a lot of different traumas in my life. And
Yes, sir.
I just kind of gave up at that point and decided, you know what? Let's start robbing fools. And so we started robbing people, places, and things. And one night I get arrested for armed robbery. And that began to shift everything at that moment. Because the next day I bailed out, and my cousin that I sold drugs with came and picked me up. And remember, if things ever get hard again, we know exactly what we're going to do. And he jumps in the car. He laughs at me a little bit. And I look at him. I said, man, you ready? And he knew exactly what I was talking about. He's like, man, let's do it.
Mm.
And at that point, that's when everything just shifted, became basically immersed in drug selling. And, felt like that was the only way that I was going to be able to survive this situation is drug selling. I needed a lawyer. I needed to make some money. I needed to eat. I needed all these other things that I felt like I needed. And so I jumped in, and that's what I did.
Wow. Wow, brother. Wow. Well, thank you for sharing such a detailed uh, perspective of your life and just in opening up to us. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, we need to hear that. We're talking. We're talking to. We're looking at a Morehouse School of Medicine straight A 4.0 individual. Not me. Well, yeah, me, but him. Thomas Cotton. Thomas Cotton. But there's another side of Thomas Cotton that I think we need to understand and respect the road, the trials that he faced to get him to where he's at, to get him to the road of redemption, you know. And it wasn't, I'm sure it wasn't a hard plate. It wasn't an easy thing just to get to. So before we go into our next phase of the discussion, though, I want to encourage all our viewers to subscribe, to share, to share, like, and subscribe. This is the only webcast. This is the only podcast that you have this type of experience speaking to the justice involved experience. And not only are we showing the problem, but in future episodes, we're going to illustrate the problem and illustrate possible solutions to get
Mm-hmm.
beyond these very complex problems. And also, we want you to engage. We want you to engage each other, engage us, engage senior leaders, engage those who are responsible for the resources to further facilitate environments where they're safe and proper to live in. So I ask you to
Yeah.
engage, share, subscribe, and like this program. Thank you. So back to our line of discussion, our discussion here. There's a lot of redemptive uh, qualities. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
redemptive qualities and a lot of redemptive opportunities in your story. So when we say redemption, and that's a key part of the very name of our podcast here. When we say the word redemption, what does it mean to you?
Yeah. It's giving the opportunity for a person to change their life in a way where they use everything that they've gone through and change around for good, so to speak. When I think about redemption, there's a value to life. It's like a coupon. There's a value.
Mm,
And
mm,
when you turn that coupon in, it gives you a return back, right? And so there's a value to life. And when you start to engage life differently and you see the value in life and you recognize that there's an opportunity for atonement, you're able to redeem that life. You're able to see the value of that life back within the surroundings and environment. So to me, redemption is about making a change, a sustainable change that allows you to live a life differently, a worthy life differently. And so there's many different ways that I can explain it, but to me, that's where redemption comes from. It's the idea that my life was worth something at the point, even in the middle of the challenges that I was going through.
Excellent. And one word that that was an excellent how you characterized redemption. That was excellent. But one word that really resonated with me in that whole in your whole definition was atonement. Was atonement. How do we
Mhm.
atone? How do we know we did a wrong? And how do we build up the courage to go to that person, that group, and identify the wrong? And what are the steps? I'm sure there are some scientific steps mixed with artistry to kind of get the atonement across.
Right.
And so in the future episode, we're going to speak to that. We're going to speak to the atonement process and the power of atonement, not necessarily for the one atoning, for the but for the but for the that's being atoned, but the one that's the atoner, and how did that bring together communities and so forth. So Thomas, upon your release, you mentioned that you did some robberies or a robbery.
Mhm.
And as I understand it, in between the robbery, while you were awaiting uh, trial, you were involved in an elaborate drug operation.
Yeah.
Can you
At
can
this
you,
point,
can
it
you
wasn't
speak
elaborate
that
yet, but
again?
I said it wasn't elaborate at that point yet. We'll talk about it.
Okay, let's talk about it then. Let's talk about
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing I do want to say though, it's when you talk about atonement, and I know we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but I just want to set this up.
it. Yes, sir.
When you say you recognize you did a wrong, while I'm doing everything prior to being arrested, I didn't see any wrong in what I'm doing. I saw survival. I saw that
Mm,
I needed to survive. The difference between that redemption and that atonement was, even though I feel like I was putting my back was against the wall, I had to own everything that I did in the process. I had to own it. And I
yes.
had to realize that I sold myself short. There was more that I could have done, instead of going a different way. But then I also look back and say, there's no way 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old, and so on and so forth, Thomas could see these things, because these things were never brought to me. I was never exposed to certain things. What I
Right.
was exposed to, I excelled at. And so a lot of times we have to look at atonement in a way where, this has nothing to do with the system that's against me. This has
Mm,
everything to do with me and this person that I am and this life that I've been given,
excellent.
and being able to move it forward. But in that moment when I'm arrested and I'm locked up, my world is over, because the way I looked at it in that moment is, I'm going to prison. And we already know people who go to prison don't get a second chance. That's my mindset
Mm,
at the time.
yes.
So selling drugs was just a byproduct of my hopelessness, even going deeper and more despair. And so as I started doing it, we literally had a system. Like I said, we just got out there, started trying it. We started making a little money. We lost a little money, started making a little bit more, lost a little bit more, but we were getting the rhythm of what it's like. And so we would be outside on the corner from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock every night. That was our time. And that's when we knew that the iron was hot, and we created this space for us to be there no matter who was there.
Mm.
The 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 addicts used to call us the Buddha heads, uh, because we're both half Korean, half black, and so me and my cousin, the Buddha heads out here, and so we would have the spot locked down from 10 to 2, pretty much. Everybody get a little bit of money here and there because there's enough
Oh,
for everybody, but for the most part, that was our
mm,
time, and we did that regularly, and every night we would be there doing this. And it's not like it wasn't dangerous. I mean, there's hundreds of people out there at times. Sometimes there's just a few, but the police were always around, people drive-bys and all this other stuff. But we still did it.
yes, sir.
And you think about the desperation a person has to have to still be out there on the corner every night knowing all this danger is right around you.
Right.
You know, who wants to put themselves in that kind of danger? But this is the way of life. You know, you ain't no punk. This is what you
Right.
do. And we always had this connect out of state. So I was found guilty of the robbery, but I didn't have to turn myself in for a couple months. And we had this connect out of state. And we decided, you know what, let's take a trip out of state and see what we can, if we can make this connection and reconnect. And we did. And you know, I was able to experience it for one trip and went out there and made a lot of money, a lot more than I would at home. And but I had to leave that trip, go home and turn myself in. And when I turned myself in, I ended up getting a year. And you know, that was, I didn't know at the time how much grace and mercy that was, because I probably should have gotten 3, but because it's my first offense, and I smiled at the judge, and my grandfather wrote a letter. He was lenient on me. It's my first time offense. But you know, while I was in there, I said to myself, man, this is the worst experience ever. I ain't never coming back here. This is crazy. I mean, it was just crazy. The rules were different. You couldn't talk to people the same way as you did on the street without something jumping off. You know, you're away from uh, your family, your people, your girl's cheating on you, or at least mine was. Your homeboy smashing your girl, all this, you know, it's crazy, but that's the world. I don't want to be here. I'm hurt. I'm broken. But the day I get out, there's nothing different. I didn't go through any programming. I didn't have any reentry plans. I didn't have anything. There was nothing there for me. Everything that was there for me was exactly the same way when I left. I get out, my cousin's already, you know, doing his thing, and you know, the out of state connect is popping, right? And popping's an 80s word if you don't know, so I'm just throwing that in there. And so it's really one of those things where you know, I have a choice. I'm gonna try to get a job, but jobs ain't working. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna hit a couple out of state trips. Went out of state, made some good money very quickly, got me a car, and decided, you know, I'm gonna still try to get me another job, and found a job, and quit going out of state. But if things ever get hard again, I know exactly what I'm gonna do.
So you retired twice.
I retired twice.
Oh man, look at you.
Fast forward, this is a story that a lot of times is the crazy part. All right, so fast forward a year later, I get in an argument with my boss at work. I cuss him out. He cusses me out. I quit. He fires me. And after that moment, I took the check that I had and the money I had and everything I had. A week later, we're back out of state looking for the connect. And this time, there's 3 things that's going to happen to me. I'm going to be dead, I'm going to be in prison, or I'm going to make it. But this is it. This is the route. This is the only route I'm taking right here. And so we made some good money. We did some good things. One night, I ended up getting shot. The next night, I ended up getting in a car accident that should have killed me. I was on the same emergency room bed 2 nights in a row. Doctors looking at me like, weren't you here last night? Yes. And so 2 nights in a row, same emergency room bed. But I stayed back on that trip. On that trip, there was everybody on my, you know, that I was doing this with. They ended up going out of state. I stayed home. When they came back, they were like, man, we don't need you anymore. We know how everything runs. You know, this is like, you know, it was almost like a slap in the face. And, you know, I didn't want any smoke. I'm done pretty much at that point anyways. And so I was saying to them, you know, I'm gonna do one more trip and I'm gonna quit. And so this was the last trip. It was the largest amount we sent out of state. And you know, I had a guy that I worked with out of state. Christmas was coming up. Decided to leave everything with him and said, you know, when I come back after Christmas, I'm coming back January 6th. I'm gonna collect the rest of my money. We're done. And he was in agreement. We're done. We never made it to January 6th. January 1st, him and his girlfriend was shot and killed in a drug robbery. That led to a murder investigation, led to a drug conspiracy investigation, and led to me being on the run from the FBI for 6 months.
Wow.
Um, and so, when we talk about atonement and we talk about acknowledging the wrongs that we do, um, that moment and those moments right there always live with me. There's a lot of people in this what I thought was just me surviving, that their lives got shattered.
Yes,
And
sir.
so atonement is understanding that, even though I can't say that's my fault, I can atone for the level of problems that took place within this scenario and everything else.
Yes, sir.
I didn't know that at the time, but once I got locked up, um, big transformations happened, and later on when we have more time, I'll talk about my big transformations that happened.
Yes, sir.
But the reality was, if it wasn't for God in my life, I would have been a whole different person. And uh, and beginning to recognize my fault in this.
Yes, sir.
There's a person that, there's a lot of people, over almost 30 people told on me in that six
Mm.
months that I was gone, on the run. And I've come in contact with over 27 of them, 26, 27 of them face to face. And I didn't have a problem with any of those people who told on me. And the main reason why is because if I didn't do what I did, you can never do what you done.
Come on, man. Come on.
So it's me being a drug dealer that gave you the ability to do what you did.
Yes.
And I can't hold you accountable for my actions. I did that.
Yes, sir.
And um so that was, some of the biggest transformations and steps that I had to take for redemption.
Wow. Wow. I tell you, Thomas, you know, my story is going to pale in comparison to your story. But I tell you, yeah, I'm learning. I'm learning about my brother right now. I knew a few things about you, but just the things that you're just allowing us to understand about you is very refreshing. And I pray that someone, that guy right there, that gal right there, hearing this story, knows that there's redemption in it, that there's atonement in it, that there's
Mhm.
opportunity in it, that this is not the only thing that they can do, and it may not just be a drug. I'm a drug dealer, or I stick people up, but my life is I have a dead end job or a dead end career, or you know I don't even have a job. There's even opportunity in that. So please, as we're listening to Thomas's story, please, take parts and pieces of his story and apply it to yours. Let's get busy. That's an
Yeah.
80. That's an 80s phrase as well.
That's
Let's get busy.
let's get busy, you guys. Let's get busy.
Let's get busy. Let's get busy and get it done. Let's let's
Yeah.
let's set a goal and achieve that goal. One goal every week. Doesn't have to be large. Just wake up at 9 o'clock every morning. That could be a goal.
Yeah.
Be on time for this thing. That could be a goal. So, you know, his
Let me
story is so
let me
impactful.
tell people real quick one way
Yes,
they can
yes,
get
sir.
busy before we get into this part of my story.
Yes,
You
sir.
can get busy by like, share,
Oh,
subscribe, and engage. We
yes, sir.
want you to like, share, and subscribe this podcast because we're going to continue to bring content. I know this is about my story, and the next one will be about Dr. Lawrence's story, but we have content that we really want to see impact our community. So like, share, subscribe, engage, but also hit that notification button so that you can know when our next podcast and webcast is going to drop.
Excellent. Excellent. Thomas, upon your release, I know there was a lot of pressures on you. How hard was it? We spoke about the word
Hmm.
redemption a few times. How
Yeah.
hard was you to actually find the road to redemption?
Yeah.
That number one. Number two, take the first step on the road to redemption. And three, remain that road to redemption.
Oh man. So, you're battling a person that walks into a prison one way and coming out another way. My mindset says I'm excited because I think things are going to be different this time. I've worked on myself. I'm smarter. I'm in better shape. I'm older. I feel more mature. I'm almost 30. And so at this point, it's really thinking that everything is going to work out. Um, I thought that getting out, that people would be more than willing to give me any kind of job because the skill sets that I attained. And but no, it was still hard. I was still that person getting out of prison. I was still the person in the early 2000s when reentry wasn't a big deal, getting out and having to figure my way out. I got out in the year 2000. And so we just finished Y2K, finished all that. Ain't nobody thinking about me. And so I thought, going out, I'm following all the instructions I was taught while I was in prison on how to get a job, how to fill out an application. You know, did not realizing at the time that the tools that I was given on how to fill out an application was probably the number one thing that was holding me back. I was told to fill out an application, and when you get to the question, have you ever been convicted of a felony or a crime, to say yes, and then where it says explain, put will explain in interview. One of the things I learned, and I teach people all the time, is putting will explain in interview is like saying, yes, I've been convicted of a felony, and no, I'm not going to tell you what it is until I see you. Like, think about that. I don't know what you did. I don't know if you killed somebody, raped somebody, did all this, but you're not going to tell me until you see me. You know, you ain't going to see me. That's as simple as that. So, you know, transitioning to really rethink all these things that I've been taught, my resume and all the information, the way it looked and how I presented myself. The reality was I was presenting myself like a criminal. I was presenting myself like somebody that has something to hide. In reality, I did a lot of wrong things, but remember, redemption's for me. So I am redeemed. So I need to begin to own that redemption and begin to own the process and not let everybody dictate to me how it was supposed to go. But that still meant I had to take a minimum wage job, tossing 5-gallon water bottles. And that's what I did. I owned that, and I did it with a smile. And so I knew that this is just my first job of many. The next job was a moving company. And the next job, I was working in an office. I had an office environment, and ever since, I've been working in an office environment. But I had to take the moving company and start working in this guy's office because it was a mess. And I just helped him clean his mess up and try to do this. And now I could put office working on my resume, and I own my redemption. You can't tell me I didn't work in the office. I did. So if you call him and say, did he work in your office? Yes, he worked in my office.
Excellent.
But you know, learning how to redeem that story was a challenge, because there was information given to me that was wrong. There was a lifestyle I lived before that's all I'm familiar with and I'm battling. And then there's all these other things. And one more thing, I'll give an example. I got tons of these stories, but another story about the toughness of having to make sound decisions. I went to go see my probation officer, and for years I've been planning the weekend I get out, I'm going to see my grandmother. And I prepared for that. And when I go see my probation officer, he asked me, you know, so what's your plans for this weekend? I said, well, I'm going to go see my grandmother. I haven't seen her in the time I was locked up. And during the time I was locked up, my grandfather passed away. And so I want to make sure that I get a chance to spend some time with her. And he said, well, you know, that's where you did all your crime at, right? And I was like, yeah. He was like, well, you ain't going. It's like I'm going. In my mind, I didn't say it out loud. I'm going. Been planning this for a minute. And for him, he was like, yeah, he doesn't see the change. All he sees is what I am on paper. He doesn't see anything that I did while I was incarcerated, the amount of people I began to help I helped hundreds of people while I was incarcerated. The different transformations, that I'm a different person. He doesn't see any of that. All he knows is this is where you were at when you did your crime, and you ain't going there.
Yes, sir. Wow.
And I jump on the elevator, and when I got on the elevator, in my mind, I'm like, I'm going. When I got in the elevator, it's 13 floors, and I had to go 13 down. On that ride down, I started asking myself, is your first act of freedom going to be disobedience?
Wow.
I said, not this time.
Come on.
I did that last time. Remember, you did that last time. What happened? And I also told myself a long time ago, I was 22 years old, 1 month, 4 days when I got locked up. And then I was going to give myself 22 years, 1 month, 4 days doing the right thing and making the
Mm,
right decisions to see if things will change. And
right.
so I gave myself 22 years, 1 month, 4 days to see if things would change. And it didn't take 22 years, 1 month, 4 days.
Wow.
It didn't take that long. It just took making the right decisions. I know this is running a little long.
No,
I
go
gotta
on.
say this. I gotta say this one part though, real quick. That decision on that elevator not to go led me to staying in. I lived in Sacramento at this time. Staying in Sacramento and going to a JCPenney outlet and looking at coats.
Wow.
Now, mind you, it's September in California. It ain't cold. I don't need to be looking at coats, but I'm looking at coats because I haven't seen coats in years, right? And so um, while I'm looking at these coats, this guy walks up to me and he's like introduces himself. We end up talking. I'm like, two guys at a coat rack in September in California. It's not That's not normal. But anyways, he introduces me to a person who ends up being my cousin's best friend, but she invites me to this church. I go to this church in December. Um, and when I go to this church in December, I am fresh out. I'm a few months out of prison. But the way things will end up working, by July 1st, the next year, I'm the youth pastor of 60
Oh,
to
wow.
70 kids
Oh,
at this
wow.
church.
Excellent.
And when we talk about atonement and redemption, sometimes you just got to stay the course. And even though it doesn't start off the way you want it to start off, how you engage your redemptive process and trusting the process leads you to places that you never knew would happen. Because I never saw this coming. I didn't even seek it out. It was just there for me. I just had to show up and walk through the process. And so the work that you put in on your life, people will eventually notice, and change and transformation will happen.
Yes. Yes, man. Excellent. Excellent. You mentioned that you are a youth pastor, and that's a certain degree of authority and influence, and you're entrusted with beautiful young minds.
Right.
So obviously, the leadership saw something in you to put you to entrust you with that responsibility. And speaking of
Absolutely.
responsibility, you know, from there you just continue to ascend in different levels of responsibility to the point where you're a CEO and president of your own company and business. You've been on the board of directors of aspect of the whole Morehouse School of Medicine. So, what impact has Morehouse School of Medicine, the community of Morehouse School of Medicine, has it had on your life?
Yeah. So when I 2010, I started my own organization, a nonprofit called Redemption and Advancement Alliance. And at the time, I just knew that there was something different that had to happen with reentry. I had no clue on how to run a nonprofit, anything. That's a whole other story. When we get to that story, you all are
Yeah.
going to be like, that it only took you that long to get a nonprofit? Yeah. And I had no clue what I was doing. But through the process, I'm engaged in community, and someone from the community invited me to this the Community Action Day that Morehouse School of Medicine Prevention Research Center has, and I went. I met some people. They invited me to be on this board, and being a part of that board has been transformational. We're going to talk about community-based participatory research. We're going to talk about community engagement in boards and stuff like that. And I hate saying that word. I'll just say CBPR. And so when we start talking about that, we'll learn a little bit more. But in that process, I started to see that academia and community can work together to really resolve a lot of different things, and it needs to happen. It needs to be together. I also became a part. I'm still on the board for the institutional review board for Morehouse School of Medicine, where we, listen through people's proposals to work with the, I won't say at risk, it's the vulnerable populations. And so I've been able to speak into their processes quite a bit, and be able to learn their process to help me inform my work also. And so Morehouse School of Medicine has always become a part of the process, because there's this two-sided way of looking at things. And then when you throw the IRB in there, Institutional Review Board, there's another aspect of research that you have to go through, and levels that you have to pass. You can't just do research to be doing research. And with myself, with my history and the way I look at things, when I approach research projects, you're going to be challenged to the fullest. And so being able to utilize my experiences and everything else to help people see that research should matter, not only because you want to get the information, but there are people involved with your research that you need to be concerned with, and not just using, not misusing them. But you can use them for information, don't misuse them, because that's important.
Excellent. Excellent. And ladies and gentlemen, let me just let you know that the Morehouse School of Medicine Magic Programs 2003 uh, award winner, as far as
23.
23, 2023. Okay, 23. Award winner in research is one Thomas Cotton. So I mean that is a huge, huge accolade, and I'm sure it's well deserved. And just thank you. Again, let's look at Thomas's life. Let's do Thomas's life in review really quick. Age of 13, age of 14, age of 20, in his 20s, coming out of prison on or about 30 years old, current CEO of his business. So there are opportunities. No matter where you start, does not mean that's where you have to finish. So Thomas, what keeps you in this work, man?
As long as a person has a heartbeat, there's an opportunity for redemption. You're going to hear that over and over again. That's my tagline for our podcast. And by the
Yes, sir.
way, like, share, subscribe, engage. But that's the thing. I look at my people, and I have a heartbeat for my people, because I look back at the little boy that I was, and everything that I had to go through, and the challenges of my environment. I was taught things in my environment that no one else, no one was going to teach me other things. These are the things that people taught me. And I got caught up in a cycle of violence, incarceration, and almost losing my natural life to many things, whether it's the violence or the incarceration. I faced the rest of my natural life in prison at the age of 22. And all I was trying to do was live.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I wanted to have a little fun while I was in there, but who doesn't? The reality is, a lot of our people are in these communities, and they're hearing the same information, and they want to live, but they also want to have a little fun. And they're not really trying to harm anybody, but this is the way of life. And this is the pressure that they feel. And this all the pressure that's there. My hope is that through the work that I do, I'm able to relieve some of that pressure from people, that they may be able to make different decisions, because I'm no different than anybody else. The things that I've gone through, the redemptive process that I have, it's there for everybody. And my hope is that everybody gets a chance to experience this redemption that I have, um, even though their challenges are different than mine. Just because you're looking at me, and eventually you're going to hear Dr. Lawrence's story, just because you're looking at two people who are sitting here talking about solutions for the problems, it doesn't mean that everybody is just like us. If you just do what they do, no, we all have different trauma. We all have different issues. And so my hope is that we can all come together, especially through this Inside Out podcast, and make a difference, because change does happen from the inside out.
Wow. Wow. Change does happen from the inside out. I like that, man. Hey, are there any parting words or any final thoughts that you want to leave the group?
No, I think, engage. That's
Engage.
it. I need you all to know that Dr. Lawrence and I are spending our time within this podcast. In our regular lives, we have things going on. Engage the process so that we can begin to give back to people, not in a sense of a handout, but a hand up, and really beginning to um, see the needs in our communities, and realize that you are the solution for those. Sometimes if you see a need, if you ever said, someone needs to tell that little boy, pull his pants up. Well, create a relationship with that person so they can hear you and understand why you're asking them to pull your pants up. Or that little girl needs to dress a little different, or this and that. If you see a problem, you could be the solution.
Yeah,
And so just get yourself equipped for that. And, like, subscribe. We're going to equip you for some of these things. But
excellent.
let your heart beat towards your community.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Thomas, for just allowing us to peek into your life. Tonight we spoke. We had an opportunity to look through the eyes of the 14-year-old Thomas Cotton. We had the opportunity to see how he found the road to redemption, how he had the courage, and how he had the courage to remain on that road to redemption. What were the events or episodes which facilitated his transformation, and what keeps him on the road to redemption? So I thank you so very much, and I know someone who heard this podcast this evening was touched by what you said, and they're going to move out smartly because of something what you just said. But we have another show coming up. We have another show coming up in episode 3, and Thomas, would you like to talk about that episode 3? Just give everybody a
Now
little.
we're going to talk about stories again, but Dr. Lawrence has a story of his own, and you need to come back and hear Dr. Lawrence's story. And it's pretty interesting because we're laying the foundation of why we're here together on the Inside Out podcast, because we know that our stories, though they started the same, they went apart, but we have a way of coming back together, and we want to give back to you. So stay tuned to hear Dr. Lawrence's story. You need to make sure that you hit that subscribe button so that we know you hear the notification button. I'm sorry. And so you hear when this is going to drop. We have other podcasts set up for you all. We're going to talk about some deep things, and we're definitely going to want you all to tune in and hear what we have to say.
One thing that Thomas and I definitely have in common is that life for us was no crystal stair.
Right.
Although you see us today, and you may have an impression on who we are and where we came from, life for us wasn't that sweet. We are in given all the details you just heard from Mr. Cotton, and the details you'll hear from me. It's a lot you didn't hear. It's a lot you didn't hear, which makes the complete story.
Mm-hmm.
But always remember this: regardless of where you begin and where you end, everyone and everything is a resource. It takes a network of ascension and progression to defeat a network of depression and oppression. So let's make the net work.
And no matter where someone's story starts off at, that's not where they have to end, because as long as the person has a heartbeat, there's an opportunity for redemption.
Thank you so very much, and we hope to see you again real soon. Have a good evening.
Cool.